Edmund Kirby Smith, January 1863, the Confederate War Department promoted the newly minted Lieutenant General Edmund Kirby Smith to command the Department of Trans-Mississippi. That's the largest in the Confederacy. The territory is 735,000 square miles. Now, I didn't compute that into 20% of the Confederate population. 25,000 50,000 soldiers in the entire department. 25,000 in Arkansas under Philopolis Holmes, 11,500 in Texas under John Magruder, and 9,000 in Louisiana under Richard Taylor. I suppose I should put on the Trans-Mississippi Department, which you probably know anyway. Prior to his departure from Richmond, Smith met with Jefferson Davis and Secretary of War James Seddon to discuss the assignment. The primary concerns in Richmond were these. Number one, protection of the Mississippi River. Number two, defense of the lower Mississippi Valley. Therefore, Louisiana is a priority, a strategic priority. And Western Louisiana District Commander Richard Taylor is a key. Kirby Smith characterized Taylor's district as, quote, among the most defensible in the world. Comparatively, few men could repel a host of invaders. And to Taylor, Kirby Smith, and Smith, from his training and services, seemed an excellent selection for command. Boy, were they both wrong. Okay, objectives today. Edmund Kirby Smith in the Trans-Mississippi in 1863. 1864, I'll do that one next year. We're going to look at Kirby Smith as a military commander, a leader, a strategist. We're going to look at Edmund Kirby Smith as a politician. He is, or becomes, the Confederate government in the department. We have to look at the way he deals with state governments. We have to look at the way he deals with diplomacy, with issues he comes to grip with foreign powers. Plus the external battles with the Union, plus internal battles with his subordinates. Kirby Smith is a skilled leader, a skilled commander, but he is flawed. His visions did not always translate to practical realities, and one of the reasons is his people skills weren't always great. Now there he is as a younger man. He was born in St. Augustine, Florida, May 16, 1824. Considered one of the most promising officers. West Point grad, class of 45, veteran of the antebellum Army, Mexican War. He was the commander during the secession crisis, commander of Camp Colorado in Texas, and he refused to surrender to the secessionists in Texas. He told them, you come in here, I'll kill you. If I have to leave, I'll fight my way out. It's only when his commander, Twiggs, surrenders the department that Kirby Smith surrenders the fort. He offers his services to the Confederacy. He was ordered to New Orleans, where he would have taken control of the city, but he was late. And so by the time he gets there, somebody else is in charge. They send him up to Virginia. He goes to Virginia. He's going to organize recruits. He will later become Joseph Johnston's chief of staff, and then a brigadier general under Johnston. He sees combat at First Manassas, but only briefly because he's wounded almost immediately when he reaches the field. Nevertheless, he becomes a Southern media hero. Even though in his own words, his participation was limited to moving on the double quick so as to bring my command on the flank of the enemy. that time, he's wounded. Nevertheless, he's a hero. Davis gives him a promotion. Davis gives him command of the Department of East Tennessee. He wants Smith's leadership skills, his organizational skills. You got to build something here. There's a situation in East Tennessee that's relatively unstable, and Kirby Smith is not happy about this assignment. He said, I am overwhelmed with cares and troubles. East Tennessee is against us. All accounts given me were far short of the truth. So now he's complaining and he's blaming. I did. He helps plan the Kentucky campaign with Braxton and Bragg. I'm talking about complainers, right? And they do pretty well. I mean, they get up into Ohio and all this business. It's October '62, and after the battle at Perryville, Bragg orders a retreat. Kirby Smith is bitter. He's resentful. He considers resigning, become a minister. Davis calls him to Richmond. We got to talk this over. He gives him a promotion, and he gives him command of the Trans-Mississippi. Kirby Smith happy? No. He wants battlefield glory, not an administrative position, especially one in the far-flung reaches of the Confederacy. I have a Herculean task before me, he complained. An empire in extent, no system, no order, all to be done from the beginning. I feel my responsibilities are great, and my troubles will soon commence. How pathetic. He arrives in the Trans-Mississippi. Oh, 10-point map. I should have done that. Oh, there he is. I'll move over here. I missed the one. I got the letters here. It says PowerPoint map. Anyway, he arrives in the Trans-Mississippi at Alexandria, Louisiana, which is up there in the left. And again, he the same complaints. He writes Davis, there's no system in place here. You know, what am I supposed to? Well, he's got to strengthen the departments. He's going to build the bureaus. There's no infrastructure. He has no plans to take the field, at least yet, except in case of emergency. But see, he's despondent about all this. He sees himself as a master strategist and tactician, rather than as a bureaucrat. He writes to his wife, my duties now and for some time must be principally of an administrative character. It is in that field that my usefulness, if I have any, will be felt. He meets with Richard Taylor. And, you know, I got to talk about what Richmond said. Concerns for Vicksburg. Concerns with the Mississippi River Valley. Something should be done on our side of the river to relieve Vicksburg, he tells Taylor. Here we have three guys we want to talk about. That's Taylor. Smith, that's Walker. They also discuss manpower, the lack of manpower in the Trans-Mississippi. Now, Smith, before he left, he had instructions to send John G. Walker's division down from Arkansas. It was the division of Texans that were in Arkansas. So send them down from Arkansas to Louisiana, in essence giving Taylor operational control. All right, well, he talks about that with Taylor. Smith remains in Alexandria just long enough to coordinate his staff. And 10 days after he crosses the river into Louisiana, he arrives in Little Rock, Arkansas, to meet with Confederate leaders there. The action puzzled Smith's chief of staff, William R. Boggs. Earlier, Smith had confided to Boggs that Davis was very much annoyed with Theophilus Holmes, who Smith replaced, who centered his thoughts and ideas on Arkansas alone, leaving the rest of the department to take care of himself. Yet, Smith goes to Arkansas and stays here for 3 weeks, despite instructions to defend the local Mississippi Valley. Why? Why? Well, I'll tell you. Politics of command. Politics played a key role in orienting Smith's focus toward Arkansas. His assignment to the Trans-Mississippi was in part a response to demands from the Arkansas congressional delegation. The Arkansas congressman lobbied the Davis administration to put somebody in charge that knew what the heck they were doing. A member of the War Department said the Arkansas politicians insisted on a change in commanders, and these congressmen displayed serious indications of dissatisfaction and complained that Richmond was neglecting them. Another member of the War Department cited the lamentable record of bad management and failure in Arkansas. And he even said, recognized the disorder and confusion, his words, and demoralization in Arkansas. And the Confederates were worried, maybe Arkansas, I don't know that they're going to help the Union, but I don't know that they're going to help us either. Arkansas newspapers, Arkansas politicians, all of the pressure to send somebody with a good reputation, a capable general. Kirby Smith was that general. And he felt indebted to the Arkansas cabal that lobbied for his appointment to command. Now, Smith is not stupid. He knows any change in leadership requires action. And on March 18, he writes to Kirby Smith, a pressing necessity requires your personal presence in Arkansas. And he advised Kirby Smith to go there. Use your ability and influence to restore order. But he qualified that suggestion and says, remember, the primary importance of your mission is maintaining command in the lower Mississippi. Plan and direct operations there, and then go to Arkansas. On the day Seddon composed that letter, what did I say? The 18th of March. On the day he composed that letter, Kirby Smith arrived in Louisville. And Smith will also meet with Missouri Governor Reynolds and with Missouri General Sterling Price. They start pressuring Smith to launch an invasion of Missouri, reclaim the loyalties of disaffected Confederates. Missouri politicians, they've been pressuring Davis as well. Arkansas, Missouri. Smith agrees to lead a campaign into Missouri, but only when he has enough troops. Therefore, he's not going to send Walker from Arkansas to Louisiana. He's going to keep him in Arkansas. That way, they'll be a little closer to Missouri once the opportunity arises for him to go and retake Missouri. See, here's the point. For Kirby Smith, Louisiana is a piece to a larger puzzle, and that larger puzzle is Arkansas, Missouri. So by keeping his eye and his focus on Arkansas and Missouri, he basically is leaving Taylor to fend for himself. Now, while Kirby Smith is in Arkansas, a force of about 16,000 Federals advance up the Bayou Teche. Bayou Teche. 16,000 Federals. By the time Taylor returns, by the time Smith returns, Taylor's in retreat. So now Smith has got a real problem. He summons Walker to Louisiana. He also orders troops from Texas across the Sabine River. We need help. Who else can help? Let's say he's got Texas, Taylor, Walker. How about Pemberton? He asked John C. Pemberton, send me reinforcements in Vicksburg. Pemberton says, are you serious? You send me reinforcements. I'm not reinforcing you. Smith abandons Alexandria ahead of the Union Army, and he reestablishes headquarters in Shreveport. Shreveport's not on the map. It's a fine selection of maps in my opinion. If you go all the way up, see where it says Alexandria, Red River, go up there on the diagonal, and up in the upper left corner in that white spot, that's Shreveport. Shreveport, we'll get to Shreveport. Strategic location on the Red River. A lot of manufacturing facilities. It is the logical location for Trans-Mississippi headquarters. You've got access to Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, Missouri. And Taylor actually had suggested such a move during their first meeting. Smith said no. Why? Why did he say no? That makes perfect sense. Smith was acting on advice from his personal surgeon, Dr. Saul Smith, no relation. Dr. Saul Smith's hometown was Alexandria. They don't want to go to Shreveport. Wants to stay home. Kirby Smith described Shreveport at that time as, quote, a miserable place with a miserable population. Well, now he but this actually works for him because the geography makes it easier to concentrate troops at a central position. Shreveport is a central position. It's easier to use interior lines. Everything feeds into this little corner. The Federals stay in Alexandria for about a week, and then in early May they head east to invest Port Hudson. Taylor moves back into the region. He wants to push southeast and threaten New Orleans. That's his plan to relieve Vicksburg and Port Hudson. Port Hudson in particular. You threaten New Orleans, the Federals are going to have to think twice about what they're doing at Port Hudson. Smith learns of the plan and says, I don't think so. The defeat of General Grant is terminus ad quiem of all operations in the West this summer. He told Taylor to stay up in northeast Louisiana, across from Vicksburg, that area. Remember all that we really can spend and stuff too. He says there are supply depots that are supplying the Federals investing in Vicksburg, opposite Vicksburg, and you, General Taylor, should take your forces and strike them. So, the Federal line ran for about 35 miles, from Young's Point down to, or from Lake Providence down to Young's Point with Milliken's Bend at the center. The problem is, this was no longer a supply line that Grant used. Grant's not doing that anymore. It was a Union position, but it was mainly troops, convalescents, black troops. There was no genuine importance to the position. Now, Confederate cavalry riding around the area report back to Smith, and they say that's the only troops that are there are convalescents and some Negro troops, according to the report. And this prompts Smith, and by extension Taylor, to underestimate the opposition they're going to meet when they move against this position. Now, an aside. Earlier, Smith had issued orders for his troops to capture ex-slaves in service to the enemy. He assumed that these slaves made up a labor force, not soldiers. And the idea is once they were captured, they would be returned to their owners. All right, fine. June 7th, Walker attacks the positions. The attacks are uncoordinated. The attacks fail. The combat's not important for what we're talking about. There are two things that are important. Kirby Smith's strategic vision and the treatment of black Union troops. First, Confederate failures along the Mississippi here reflected poorly on Smith's strategic vision. Even if the Confederates were successful at Milliken's Bend, that wasn't going to help Pemberton or Vicksburg. What Smith was doing essentially was he was complying with a request from Pemberton to help or do something, but also with a request from Joseph Johnston. Johnston's jurisdiction included Vicksburg, and he had solicited help from Smith. Now, this is Well, I'll tell you, and then you can draw your conclusion. Joseph Johnston exerted tremendous influence on Kirby Smith. After receiving the job, and remember, Smith served on Virginia. After receiving the job in the Trans-Pacific, Smith confided to a Confederate politician that he would treat suggestions from Johnston as orders. Days before Milliken's Bend, he wrote to Johnston and said, "I would willingly be back under your command at any personal sacrifice." Essentially, what he did was turn the Trans-Mississippi into a sub-district to help sustain Johnston's command and operations. Now, immediately following Milliken's Bend, rumors begin to surface that Kirby Smith plans to relieve Taylor from command and take over the army himself. Kirby Smith denied the story. And he said that this is a deliberate misinterpretation, a rumor that originated at Taylor's headquarters, designed to undermine Smith's authority. Smith demanded that Taylor's adjutant Eustace Smith counteract any misstatement in circulation. And then he tells Surgeon that should it become necessary to send an officer senior to Taylor to relieve the troops, that he, Smith, himself would go. Therefore, Kirby Smith just contradicted his own denial. He said, nobody's going to take over from Taylor, but if somebody does, it'll be me. What this indicates, in reading the correspondence and so on, is that the story originated in Smith's headquarters, not in Taylor's headquarters. And Smith puts his own loophole out there. What this does is creates conditions of mistrust between Smith and Taylor. It's going to get worse. The second problem here arose from Milliken's Bend, disposition of captured black Union troops. Most of the troops, Union troops at the battle, were members of the African Brigade, 4 new regiments of United States colored troops. They were inexperienced, and according to Brigadier General Elias Dennis, the federal commander in Northeast Louisiana, they were poorly trained, poorly equipped, and poorly led. They suffered a high casualty rate at Milliken's Bend. Many Federals claimed that the rebels, quote, were ordered to charge with cries of no quarter. Others insisted that the Confederates carried a black flag bearing death's head and crossed bones into battle and killed all they captured. Really? Can you picture these Confederate soldiers the night before they're to go into battle, sitting around a campfire with a big black piece of cloth, stitching a skull and crossed bones into the cloth? Think you dropped the stitch, Jethro. Did not, Paul. Granny coffee. It's ludicrous. Beyond that, all of these pronouncements are hearsay. There's no evidence to support this. You're getting these reports written by people who are back on the river. They weren't even at the battlefield. United States reports indicate that approximately 200 men from the African Brigade were missing in action. A Confederate source indicates that somewhere between 68 and 117 black Federals were captured. And Dennis, the Union commander, wrote, nearly all the missing blacks will probably return as they were badly scattered. And a Confederate report indicated that many drowned in the Mississippi River, trying to swim out to prison. All right, the point is this. Taylor notifies Smith. We took a number of black troops as prisoners. What do I do with them? One of Taylor's men, an officer, suggested that Smith and Taylor award 1 or 2 of the best of them to the soldiers who captured them. This suggestion does not appeal to either Smith or Taylor. Confederate law said escaped slaves in Union military service were the legal property of their owners. Therefore, soldiers captured at Milliken's Bend were in possession of the enemy and would have been a clear loss to their owners had they not been captured. Smith is sort of confounded by all this. He demands confirmation that Taylor actually took prisoners. I hope this may not be so, and that you and your subordinates may have recognized the propriety of giving no quarter to armed Negroes and their officers. Smith assumed that Taylor would simply show no quarter. Any show of mercy towards armed black Federals creates a disagreeable dilemma. Boy, this is a problem. See, here's the thing. If these black soldiers receive equal treatment as POWs, then the Confederate military essentially is repudiating the racial hierarchy of Southern society. But the Confederates, they can't kill them, but they don't want to undermine their status on their home front. If word of equal treatment for USCT, United States Colored Troops, if that spreads among the slave population, that will increase the number of slaves attempting to escape and join the Union Army. That will destabilize the Southern labor system, destabilize the social order, strengthen the enemy positions. Yeah, but you can't kill them. I mean, if you execute prisoners, that's a violation of military guidelines that require humane treatment of all soldiers taken prisoner. Plus, you're going to endanger Confederate prisoners of war. Plus, you're going to give credence to the perception of the Civil War as a race war, and that will damage Confederate hopes of European intervention. Smith, he wanted to avoid the whole thing. Now it's getting complicated. This is a delicate and important question. And Taylor writes again, what do I do with these guys? So Smith consults General Order Number 111, issued by Jefferson Davis, December 1862. The order says that all Negro slaves captured in arms be at once delivered over to the executive authorities of the respective states to which they belong to be dealt with according to the laws of said states. What does that mean? Try to dissect it. It's ambiguous. It's flawed. It doesn't address the issue of quarter. It implies that the Confederates did not hold black troops responsible for their actions. And it leaves interpretations of a variety of issues, including quarter, up to individual commanders in individual situations. So Smith, looking over the order, what do I do? What do I do? Following Milliken's Bend, he implements his own solution. Under combat conditions, officers are to show no quarter to armed black soldiers. But he reads a little further. Order 111 says, in cases of doubtful character, department commanders should contact the War Department. So Smith writes Richmond and says, what do I do? Until a response arrives, he institutes a policy that reflected his own view. In answer to communications, asking what disposition should be made of Negro slaves taken in arms, no quarter should be shown. And then he adds another little tag. But if taken prisoner, they should be turned over to the executive authorities of the states in which they were captured. Kirby Smith just contradicted himself again. Don't take black soldiers prisoner, but if you do, here's how you do it. And then he tries to explain, should Negroes thus taken be executed by the military authorities capturing them, it would certainly provoke retaliation. Good. By turning them over to the civil authorities to be tried by the laws of the state, no exception can be taken. So what he does here, that's actually pretty clever by saying this would indemnify the military and protect Confederate prisoners. Still, the policy is awkward, way too much latitude. And when you have something like that, you risk losing control over your men. So, in a practical sense, Kirby Smith's policy is no policy at all. Since the Confederate government considered captured slaves technically a state matter, Smith will seek out Louisiana Governor Thomas More, and they work out an agreement. The state will turn slaves over to the state. They will be tried in civil court, governed by civil law, and punished according to state law. The military can furnish witnesses, but this is not going to be military proceedings. The War Department finally responds to Smith 2 months later. Seddon writes back and says, the policy of no quarter exceeds the guidelines. You are to consider black federal soldiers as deluded victims to be treated with mercy and returned to their owners. All right, solve that problem. Wash my hands of that. Except something else goes on in Smith's mind. What's going on? The Union guys are using black Louisianans. Maybe we could do the same thing. So Kirby Smith looks to the trans-Mississippi slave owners for help, appeals to their patriotism, offer us a number of slaves for service. Not as combat soldiers, but service in the department's basically military-industrial complex. If a slave owner refused, Kirby Smith authorized his district commanders to resort to impressment. This makes sense to Smith in the aftermath of Milliken's Bend, in the aftermath of Seddon's directive. Smith believed that the United States practiced the forced impressment of our slaves to wage a ruthless war against their masters. The policy of our enemy in arming and organizing Negro regiments is being pushed to formidable proportions. Was it formidable? Well, being pushed to extreme proportions. Our plantations are being made his recruiting stations. Every sound black male left in the enemy becomes a soldier whom we afterwards must fight. So Smith is thinking, it's better to employ these guys in Confederate service than let them fight against us. And he announced, the temper of the people is now favorable for such a step. Orders district commanders to submit their district needs. Well, the temper of the people is now favorable for such a step. I don't think so. Arkansas Senator R.W. Johnson, who lobbied for Smith's appointment to command, he protested. Smith promptly shifted responsibility for the order to his district commanders. He tells Johnson, if the request for slaves is onerous and excessive, I can exclude you from the program. Just put it in writing, send it off, I'll give it my immediate attention. Undoubtedly, this happened in both cases. 2 weeks later, and we're in mid-September, Kirby Smith took this idea a dramatic step further. He considered calling out a military force from among the trans-Mississippi slave population. And he's got serious manpower problems. He instructed his quartermaster, a Major J.F. Minter, to prepare for the recruitment of 3,000 slaves and enlist white officers to meet them. The military needs of the department offset the political and social consequences of such an action. Now, the plan does not progress past this stage. And Kirby Smith says the groundwork for the recruitment of slaves from the military is as near a military organization as I dare venture upon. Just floating the idea and saying, well, if we do this, let's put some things in there. He's not going any farther. Why would he do this? Well, I said one thing, manpower, but just do it beyond that too. We've got to double back, so to speak. Smith sees the entire issue as a states' rights issue. If the problem of black prisoners of war in the Union Army, if that's a state matter, then using and arming slaves for Confederate service, that's a state matter. The state legislatures, if they approve or authorize the use of slaves and then take the military service, it's up to them. Smith said he would feel no hesitation to support training Negroes under command of their masters. Orange friends. Not a popular idea. A justice in the military court district of Arkansas, a guy named David Walker, tells Smith, what you're suggesting is unconstitutional. And he makes the argument, it's worse than impressment because there's no valuation of security in the return of the property and no remuneration of time and all this. And then he says, look, should it become absolutely necessary, I suppose one might go. But that's as far as anyone's going to go. Now, back to Milliken's Benefits. Milliken's Benefits, we've gone through all this stuff, with the slaves and, it's a bad plan and whatever. Taylor starts to lobby Smith to move back into the Lafourche region. The area, it's all this area around, so the sort of north and west of the Midwest. This is how he sees bringing the fight to the Federals. Pressure New Orleans. Smith approves, but he has little hope. Taylor insists that if he pressures New Orleans, that Banks will have to divest from Port Hudson. As you can see about that image. So Taylor's getting ready to go, and he's getting ready to bring Walker with him, and Smith issues orders. Well, Walker's not going anywhere. I shall order Walker's division to you whenever operations about Vicksburg permit. There are no operations about Vicksburg. There's nothing going on in northeast Louisiana opposite Vicksburg. So what Walker is instructed to do is raid plantations, burn crops, capture runaway slaves. He loses a third of this division to disease. Walker writes later, these actions opposite Vicksburg, leading to no result if they had succeeded, wasted Confederate strength and dispirited my troops. Meanwhile, Taylor, with his small command, reaches the outskirts of New Orleans. Union High Command is getting nervous. Union General William Emory advised the commander, Nathaniel Banks, vessel Port Hudson, says, you must choose between Port Hudson and New Orleans. You cannot hold both. Oh, we can play the what ifs. What if Smith had authorized Walker to go down with Taylor? What if Taylor had done that? Or what if Banks? I mean, crazy. Short trip. July 4th, Vicksburg fell. Helena fell too. July 9th, Port Hudson falls. July 4th is a turning point, a critical turning point. All turning points. Smith's getting criticized from the east. You didn't do anything to help Vic. He's getting criticized from his department. I can't believe that you had Walker wasting his time. Layer upon layer of problems. Taylor openly blames Kirby Smith. The plan I had arranged for an attack fell through as soon as I was advised that Walker's division would not join. Now he really doesn't like Smith. Well, I want to get away from Milliken's bed and all this controversial stuff. We'll talk about stuff that's not controversial. No. The Mississippi River is in Union hands. Kirby Smith, he's cut off from Richmond. He's on his own. What controversy could there be? He is the military boss. He's the civilian boss. He's the political boss. He's the representative of the Confederate government, of the Confederate military. You name it, that's Kirby Smith. And he writes Jefferson Davis, he says, I shall now be compelled to exercise powers with which I am not legally invested. I mean, he understands the gravity of the situation. This is no longer. One of his staff officers, a guy named William Ferret, it's probably a French pronunciation, right? William Ferret confided to a friend, affairs and difficulties over here are on a larger scale now. Kirby Smith, my boss's past is full of political as well as military matters. What has he got to do? He's got to revive the patriotism of the civilian population. He's got to manage the political infrastructure. And he's got to deal with the Union Army. Now, I've had some nice things to say about Smith. I've had some not so nice things to say about him. I'll go and say something nice. In the weeks that followed, Kirby Smith demonstrated his administrative skills. He might not have wanted to be an administrator, but he was good. He organized department agencies to integrate areas of cotton production, cotton procurement, cotton sale. And he tied that to the acquisition of munitions, of machinery, of medicine. He strengthened the Confederate Postal Service. It's not funny to us, but that's how you communicate that. He established a branch of the Confederate Treasury in the Trans-Mississippi, the Trans-Mississippi branch of the Treasury. He soon brought the department to the highest standard of efficiency. So, his ability to consolidate a range of areas within the Trans-Mississippi bureaucracy is, by opinion, the most significant factor in sustaining Confederate hopes west of the Mississippi, particularly after the fall of Vicksburg. He's talking about problems. What are you going to do when you move off the Mississippi River? Here's what we're going to do. Smith figures it out very quick. I mean, other people figured it out too, but he's going to put this into play in a big way. Cotton. Here's the point. Cotton purchased by foreign nationals is not subject to confiscation under international law. Let me see where I am. I have those guys. Oh, that would have been a better one. All right. I'm not the most technologically savvy. I'm still trying to get the clock on my Betamax to stop blinking. Okay. Mouth of the Rio Grande. Right there. Brownsville, Mount North. So good slide we got there today. You gotta control the mouth of the Rio Grande to resuscitate trade, right? He's talking about trade and using cotton and building up and bringing in munitions and medicine. This is a key point because you're trading with Europe, foreign nationals. The United States can't bother them. Plus, you've got miles and miles of Mexican coastline. That was this one. Well, it still doesn't show miles and miles, so I'll get it. You've got miles of coastline. All of this provides a gateway into Mexico. Transportation links, I will tell you that. The transportation links run through Texas. This is great stuff. The flow of goods into the Trans-Mississippi is essential. And Smith is going to do what he can to open up, expand, and build not only the trade, but a diplomatic relationship with foreign powers. He opens talks with Santiago. Now, it looks like Vidari, but it's probably Vidari. But I don't speak Spanish. Santiago Vidari, the Mexican governor who's Aryan, comes out. He's a pro-Confederate, all right? Let's open the markets, free, open trade, Confederate cotton, weapons, supplies, stuff from Europe comes in, we do business, everything is good. Here's what complicates matters. Don't worry about the Union Army yet. France occupies Mexico, 25,000 soldiers. So Kirby Smith's going to have to talk to the French as well, and he initiates contact with French representatives in Mexico. Napoleon III is leaning towards, or had been, really weighing recognition. He's got to wait and see after. But Kirby Smith sees this as an opportunity for him to make diplomatic overtures. The problem begins towards the end of July. Smith's putting these plans. The Confederates have already contracted with the British for weapons. And in late July, the British schooner Caroline Goodyear nears the mouth of the Rio Grande. It's got 10,000 Enfield rifles purchased by Confederates in London. The Union blockade's not the problem. The French stop the Caroline Goodyear and they say, weapons are meant for the Mexican rebels under Juarez. So we're taking. They send the cargo to a naval prize court in Veracruz. Kirby Smith protests. He sends a Confederate agent of French descent named Supervielle. That's what it looks like. Sends him to Mexico. He sends word to John Slidell, Confederate commissioner in France. He said, we need to secure this supply route. We need weapons. Smith says he will approve of any arrangement that he, Slidell, can enter into to facilitate this free and open trade. Now, before either of these diplomats can really engage, the French seize another British schooner, and again they confiscate weapons destined for transport. See, to the French, they can blockade Matamoros. They can blockade the coast because there's a rebellion in Mexico against the French. They suspect that these weapons are going to Juarez. They weren't. But weapons are considered a prize of war, and there were over 17,000 weapons on these two ships. And the French, they're taking them. This strains the relationship between Kirby Smith and the French on both sides, and it undermines relations between Confederates and the French. Meanwhile, just to duck back to the home front, Confederate state governments have been getting very nervous, and Smith needs to secure their support. He calls a conference to confer and invite the council of leading and influential citizens and government officials in the Trans-Mississippi. August 15th, Marshall, Texas, the delegation assembles, and they assure Smith of their, they declare their confidence and faith and allegiance in Kirby Smith. They do suggest that he appoint a special envoy to deal with French and Mexican affairs. This is very important. conclude, and they authorize in their statement, that Smith has the authority to act on this matter without authorization from Richmond. So with that behind him, Smith sends these agents out, outlining the conditions for trade and commerce and agreement between the nations. He says, without French intervention and assistance, the United States is going to occupy the entire Trans-Mississippi region, and they will control the Rio Grande. The French protectorate in Mexico will find a hostile power established on its frontier. Boy, that's got to send shockwaves through the Eiffel Tower. If it is the policy of the emperor to intervene in our affairs, he should take immediate military possession of the east bank of the Rio Grande. Smith just invited the French to send troops to the east bank into Texas along the Rio Grande. That's pretty good stuff. He's playing a very clever political game. If the French troops are along the Rio Grande, that will not only secure the trade routes from Matamoros and Brownsville, but it will deter the United States from eyeing Texas. The U.S. has been threatening, to go into Texas for a while. And now, if the U.S. tries this step, they're going to threaten Mexico, or French control of Mexico. Plus, if Smith can get the French to put troops in Texas, just along the river, that will strengthen his case for a formal military alliance and formal diplomatic recognition. That's pretty smart stuff. I mean, we all know it doesn't work. Slidell meets with French officials. Says the United States is trying to occupy the north side of the Rio Grande. They will. He said the United States will impede French operations in Mexico. They would. And he argues the case quite convincing. Because the French will turn over all the weapons they seized to Kirby Smith and the Confederates. Many of them will turn up in the Red River Campaign. And the French pledge no further interference. But they claim they lack sufficient troop strength to actually move across the river. Yeah. I think they didn't want to move across the river because they didn't want to antagonize the United States. Well, Smith's foray into foreign policy ultimately, I suppose, fell short, but it was a pragmatic response to a fluid situation. And in fact, go back to that was a pragmatic response to a fluid situation too. It went so far as to consider enlisting black troops in the Confederate War. In both cases, Kirby Smith was quick to assess the situation and develop a policy that, if acted upon earlier, may have had a positive effect. These are Kirby Smith's strengths. Kirby Smith's weaknesses: military planning and strategy, his focus on Arkansas, his desire to take the field and capture the war. In my opinion, Confederates would have been better served had Smith held a diplomatic or administrative position in Richmond, or even abroad. Or had he been solely the administrative commander in the Trans-Mississippi, and put somebody else like Taylor or Beauregard in charge of the war. See, because despite Smith's disdain for military or for diplomatic or administrative work, he was good. He demonstrated superior governmental abilities, particularly in the political and diplomatic. I mean, on the other hand, the Confederates could have sent an administrator to the Trans-Mississippi and let Smith run the military. He may have proven successful. I mean, he doing a pretty good job in the Kentucky campaign. He did a good job leading his troops onto the field before he got wounded. Who knows? It was a constraint of politics. It was the burden of democracy diplomacy. Constraint of politics and the burden of diplomacy that undermined Smith's military judgment. From October through November, the Federals again decided they're going to try to push into central Louisiana. They're thinking, got to get to Texas. Smith's not sure what to do. He vacillates. His response is all over the place. Eventually, the Federals turn around and go back. But the point is this: Smith has vacillated. He's changed his mind. He's issued contradictory orders. There's grumblings among his district leaders that he lacks the vision, he lacks the capacity for departmental command in a military sense. I don't know. See if I have those. Yeah, I got one more. See, Smith's moving troops all over the place because he's trying to meet these threats. He's not sure what threats coming from where. But in doing so, he projects this image, I suppose, this impression that he doesn't know what he's doing. He has no approach. He has no plan. The fact is, he did actually have a strategic vision, one that he continually adapted in response to the changing situation. What he wanted to do was concentrate in and around Shreveport. From there, he can operate along the lines, confront the enemy and find a place where there's a threat, concentrate his forces, calm his forces. He tells Taylor, our policy is clearly not to engage the enemy without some chance of success. Draw him, the enemy, back from his base, weaken his columns, and this enables us to strike a decisive blow. This is classic stuff, you know. Hit him at the weak points with all you got. And the Trans-Mississippi is threatened, you know, by armies in Arkansas, by armies in New Orleans, Louisiana. You got the Yankees across the river. And the situation in Mexico is sort of like tenuous. The problem with Smith's strategy, concentration in a central position, using materials, moving troops, is that it required the Confederates in the Trans-Mississippi to relinquish territory. You shift troops around. You've got some of these Texas troops, they don't want to leave Texas. You've got some Louisiana troops, they don't want to leave Louisiana. So they don't. Civilians don't like it, soldiers don't like it, politicians don't like it. And Smith's district commanders don't like it. Add to that, he's cut off from Richmond. So where's the guidance? Plus, he's got to take on the role of political representative of the Confederate government. He's got to balance the responsibilities of a military man with the responsibilities of a politician, with the responsibilities of a diplomat. This was no easy task. He confessed to Richard Taylor, "The president impresses it upon me. The representative and leading men of the states urge it upon me. The states must be defended. I understand. The way in which you go about doing that is creating an impression that you don't know what you're doing. To achieve the military goal of concentration, he must surrender territory. To achieve his political goal of holding territory, he must disperse his troops. It's an impossible dilemma. You relinquish territory, you got all these politicians and civilians mad at you. And the territory you're relinquishing is part of these districts, these sub-districts. But how else are you going to effectively marshal your forces? Now, Kirby Smith given his military training and experience, called for strategic retreat on both fronts. Right? His political responsibilities, they demanded he do otherwise. The constant demands of politicians frustrated him. The incessant pressure from the enemy created a sense of doom, and complaint from his subordinates, I will be polite in saying that it disappointed him. In some cases, it undermined him. Everything has gone wrong, he confessed to his wife. I am miserable, discontent, and unhappy. Boy, that's a cheery guy. Hey, you can't really blame him as well. Here are 3 books for those who want to know more about Kirby Smith in the Confederacy. Robert L. Kirby, who recently passed away. This deals with the Kirby Smithdom, as it was called. That was from the time Smith took command until the end of the war. Mississippi. This is Joseph Parks. That is biography written in, I guess it was either the 60s or late 50s. There has not been a new biography of Smith yet because I've been too lazy to finish mine. And then this is the disagreements between Richard Taylor and Kirby Smith, written by some of the story. In any case, if any of you are interested in more on Kirby Smith, these books are very insightful windows into his world. And with that, I shall conclude my remarks, except for the occasional question. Thank you.